This video is intended to help you with Notes 1, Intro to Ecology. For this video, you want to have out your notebook. There's Emerson, my daughter. You want to have out your notebook with the notes from class yesterday in person. So this should be glued in with something to write with. So these notes are introducing us to this idea of ecology, what it is, and sort of the different levels in order to introduce us to our new unit. So when we're thinking about ecology, we're often thinking about life. And as we'll talk about, it doesn't just include life, it includes non-living things too. But when we're talking about life, we can talk about small things and we can talk about big things. So I want you to look at these words here and just think to yourself for a second, which words are small and which words are big? So you might look through, and some of the words you might not know, but you might look through and say, well, I know an atom is pretty small. And then you might think, I know the solar system is pretty big. And try to kind of think about where the other ones would go in between. Don't write anything down, just kind of think about it. Are all these things living? Are some things non-living? So this is the proper order, and this is what you're going to write down in your notebook under hierarchy of life. So if we're thinking about where to begin, we begin with the atom, which is the smallest unit. Now, atoms actually aren't alive. Everything in the universe is made of atoms, both the table and the computer, but also your heart and your brain and your body. So an atom is the smallest unit. When atoms are put together, we get molecules. When molecules are put together, we now get things that are alive, cells. When cells are put together, we get tissues. When tissues are put together, we get organs, like your heart or your brain or your liver. When organs are put together into a system that is a living thing, we get an organism. You are one organism. Norbert, the bearded dragon, is one organism. When we consider organisms together, we get populations, populations together communities, and then ecosystems. I want you to kind of underline this ecosystem one, and also population. Those are going to be the two most important ones we consider this unit. Biome, biosphere, planet, solar system, and universe. If you need to pause the video to be able to finish writing them down, go ahead. But now I want you to consider which ones are alive. So we already said a cell is alive. So if we are thinking about only living things, I want you to kind of put a box or highlight or circle these ones here. Those are all fully living things. When we get outside of that yellow box, we start to consider non-living things as well. Another word in science and biology for living is biotic. Non-living is abiotic or not biotic or living. And everything outside of that yellow box can consider living things, but also non-living. So how would we even really define this first unit of ecology? Well, let's break down the word. We do this in science a lot with big, weird words that we have. So eco means house. Okay, so think about the first part of ecology means house. Ology means the study of. So if you think, okay, ecology is the study of your house. Well, what is our house? Yes, it's your apartment or the physical building that you live in, but it's what's another word for all the stuff around us? It's our environment. So ecology, this is what I want you guys to write down in your notebook, is the study of, or the science of, the relationships between organisms, living things, and their environments. Off to the side on this, I want you to add a little something that says biotic. So remember, that's living, and abiotic. That's non-living. So what I mean by that is the rocks and the water and the air and the things in an environment that aren't alive, however, that help the living things completely survive. So now we're going to get into the different levels of ecology. And you can see we're going to start with organism, the smallest, all the way to ecosphere or biosphere, the biggest. Then we are going to write examples too, and you can write lots of different examples. There's not one correct example. So ecology includes that organism to biosphere. So ecology level definitions are going to begin with organism, and an organism is any one living thing. That's your definition. Any one living thing. So an example is you. An example is Norbert. An example is one clownfish. Just Nemo. Just his dad. An example is one single tree. Okay, one individual tree. So if we think about, what about one flower? Well, that flower is part of a greater organism, that whole bush or that whole plant. Okay, so one living thing. Let's get a little bigger. What do you think a population is? More than one living thing. Good. Of the same type or a different type? Same type. So a population is a group. So one plus, more than one, of the same species living together in the same area. So if we're considering a population of humans, we wouldn't consider the people living in Jackson and the people living in Salt Lake City. We're going to just consider population, the humans living in Jackson. Same species. So we can consider elk, the population of elk that live on the elk refuge in the winter. We could consider a population of cottonwood trees that live together in the Snake River. Okay, so a group of the same species living together. Let's get a little bit bigger. Now let's include different species. So many different populations living together. Or another way we could say this is all biotic or living things in an area. So now we're going to consider the people and the elk and the cottonwood trees. Or we're going to consider Nemo and his dad. Okay, so all the clownfish. And I don't know if you guys knew, but that anemone that they live in, it's actually an animal. Crazy, huh? Not a plant. Looks planty because you're like, where's the head? Where's the brain? Well, it doesn't really have those things, but it's still an animal. We'll talk about that when we learn about cells. So all the living things in an area. And we can consider a big community like all of Jackson, or we could consider like our classroom community, us, Norbert, the plants in the classroom. Okay, let's get bigger than community. Now let's consider non-living as well. So an ecosystem is the interactions now. That's an important word. I want you to use that and underline it. Between all the living things, between the communities and the abiotic now, the non-living factors in the environment. So now we're going to consider the water, the air, the rocks, the soil, everything that we see and don't see. So in that picture of the ocean, it's the water, it's the light, it's the oxygen in the water, it's all of the fish, it's all of the coral, it's all of the algae and the little animals and plants that we can't see with our eyes. Okay, now we're going to get into an even bigger scale where we're considering sort of categories. So what's a biome? Biome is how you pronounce that word. And a biome is a group of ecosystems with the same type of plant life and climate patterns. So if you look at that map there, it's trying to say that those red dots are showing a similar aquatic, because look where they are. They're in the water, so a similar aquatic biome. So you can notice the climate in those areas is going to be similar because they're all around the equator, so probably warmer. They're going to have a similar plant life, similar climate patterns. So examples of biomes could be like the Arctic. Okay, the Arctic in cold areas has like tundra, and it can also have taiga. We have different names for biomes that can some of them are weird that you probably have never heard before, like tundra or taiga. But some of them you probably have heard before, like a desert. Okay, so a desert biome doesn't get a lot of water. It's hot and gets a lot of sun. Okay, or a rainforest. There's different types of rainforests. We have tropical rainforests. We have temperate rainforests. Grassland or prairie biomes. Deep ocean, shallow ocean. River biomes. Forest biomes. There are different types of forest biomes, not just tropical rainforests, but like the forests that we have here, often called boreal forests. Deciduous forests are biomes where they lose a lot of leaves, like in Maine or in Washington and Oregon. So those are biomes. Lastly, we've got all areas of planet Earth where life happens, the zone of life, and that's the ecosphere or the biosphere. So if you think about those words, ecosphere, biosphere, they have that sphere. Sphere is a circle, okay, and so a sphere is the whole place on planet Earth where eco or bio things are living. All right, what I want you guys to do now is look at that image that you have and notice there's a couple things. Well, there's one word that's different that we're going to add. So can you figure out which word? So individual, we have another word that we used, and that was organism. So next to individual, I want you to write organism. Okay, so let's add some notes onto this image that could kind of help us. So an individual and organism is 1. A population is 1 plus. More than 1. Greater than 1. Not equal to, greater than 1. And I'm going to write to the same, because populations are the same species. Community now, I'm going to write different. But I'm going to write living. So what's in that community there? Well, it includes the moose and the tree and the rabbit. And it's kind of hard to see what those other animals are, but those other animals. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy. And the grass and the shrubs. Okay, now ecosystem is living and non-living. So let's include the water, let's include the mountain, let's include the air, let's include the rocks. Okay, now we have biomes. Remember, these are more like categories. So like everything in that dark blue is probably the same biome. Everything that's like the same shade of green, probably the same biome. And then bio or ecosphere is where life exists on our beautiful planet. So whenever we take notes together, we'll always do a summary of the notes. Now this unit, we'll do our summaries pretty much together and pretty structured, because it's a little bit harder than you might think to do a summary. Now, when you first think about doing a summary, you might start with like, these notes were about. Okay, but in science, we want to write as succinct and clearly as possible. So we don't want a lot of fluff. We don't want a lot of extra words. In English, you write, and usually it says like, write a 2-page essay or a 10-page essay or something. And that's the minimum page number you need. In science, we often give maximums. We are never going to write a 2 or a 10-page essay. We write short amounts because we are kind of lazy, and we don't want to read a lot. We would just want to read to the point what's important. So for our summaries, we're thinking about to the point and what's important. And so the pink paragraph there is going to be the summary. And I want you guys to read through that, to copy it down. You're thinking, well, where am I going to copy this down? You're going to copy it down at the bottom of your page. And I want you to fill in the blank there. Ecology is the study of the living and non-living. We will go over this in our in-person class, next class. And so try your best to fill in the blanks. If you're not sure, give it a guess, and we will go over it next class.